Kenati יש להבין ברידס אוהד באיזה ספירס דאבו עצמן מבחינת סימיס המייכן דאבו שמקבל מחוג דרך אנס ומכל שכן כשאין לקבל מזולס דרך אנפי כנל מבחינת חיצוניס נהי דאבו שמלובושם המייכן דזוב כמו שאמר בעת חיים והעניין ידוע כמו שבס יינטויב הם מבחינת פנימיס המייכן דאבו כי השבס נקרא קדש בעינק דחוכמה מילה בגרמי
Mila begarme, thing unto, Mila begarme, it's a thing unto itself.
Thing unto itself, that's what I thought. Shul Pinat Nimis or Abba. Shul Nimis Atik Yomen. Zesh Emar Bekarapel, the Karas La Shabbos Oynek. Moshim Vor Boka Macher, Beminyan Gimel, Sudas Shabbos Barichus. The Yom Tov Nikra Mikra Kodesh. Pinat Simcha, Moshim Ma Ema Bonim Smecha. Shul Pinat Moichin the Ima Shemekabel Me'aba. Yeah, Shvita the Shabbos Uba Chochma. What is that, Gamkin?
Gamken.
The Hainu Apnimir is Abba. Pinat Chochma in the Chochma. Kodem Shemit Lies Vasoga Bina. וכן בינה בבחינת פנימי של עמק נקודס המושג חולוק ידוע. שיש אין חוכמה בבינה, בינה בחוכמה. That's all in chapter 1.
Right.
והיינו אב מחוכמה וחוכמה בבינה, שזהו בחינת ייחוד פנימיוס דאבו. מה שאין כמתחיצוניוס השפע חוכמה ובינה בחגס נהי חולו, כמו מידע שבחוכמה. In other words, there's the union of Chabad of Chochma and Bina. That's Yichud Nimi. That's when a person's actually doing his Hitbonenut. Like what it says in chapter 1 and 2, that the whole union of Chabad of both Chochma and Bina is all powered by Bina Shua Bina, in other words, analytical Hitbonenut.
Right.
And really, Hitbonenut doesn't mean that you're analyzing the real Hitbonenut, where it's Chabad, doesn't really mean where you're analyzing things in this world.
Right.
Because things in this world really is the Inyan of Midos. So even the Ian of Talmud, which is actual Ian, but it's nonetheless the Ian of Midos.
Right.
In other words, the Ian is into whether it's Chayev or Zakai, meaning Chesed and Gvura.
Right.
So even though it's a Chabad thing, but it's a Chabad of the Midos Zavka. So, even though it's the Ian, it's really Chitzonius HaIan.
Right.
Except like with real big Chachamim, that the way they learn the Gemara was really Pnimius HaIan already. But in general, it's really Chitzonius HaIan. And really the thing of Seichel is not that the Seichel is looking into what the Midah should be, but that the Seichel is looking into higher than the Seichel. That's the real Inyan of Seichel. And that's basically obvious. I mean, that's not something that needs to be explained. That's the whole thing of somebody who's real smart. He's going to think, what's really going on here? Not just to analyze how to make more money or how to get along with his wife better.
Right.
I mean, that's important, but the real Inyan of the Pnimius Chochma Bina, the real Yichud, where it's pure Chabad.
Right.
Means that even the Chabad itself is into Chabad, or actually Kachav, rather than the Midos. In other words, that the whole thing is into, even where it's a Ian of Gemara, the real Ian of Gemara is not so much of the Midos of the thing, but really of what the real Tainug and Ratzon should be, meaning that the real Indian of the Talmud is not so much just a book of laws. It's a book of the Ratzon of the Eibishter.
Right.
You know?
His Ratzon and Tainug.
His Ratzon and Tainug. And really, the thing is a pnimius thing. Like the Rabbi Rashad said that Nigla should be learned like Chassidus and vice versa.
Right.
In other words, where the thing is into the midos, even if it's a chokhmah and not a midos, it's still midos of chokhmah.
Right.
The chokhmah of whether it should be chesed or gvura, that's called chesed and gvura of chokhmah. Shnikra b'chinat vav kitzin da'aba, k'mo chesed b'chokhmah, dahainu koyach sechel amati klape chesed. In other words, it's a sechel that mati klape chesed. It's not into the pnimius of the reality, or something like that. Koyach sechel achish amati klape din chulu. U'me'irim b'chesed gvura de bina. So Chassidc Gvura of Chochmah is Meir Chassidc Gvura of Bina. Shehu ba ba'asaga b'tuv tam behesper l'schus v'l'choiv. Which, if you see that this is the Indian of the Talmud.
Right.
The Chitzonius of the Talmud, anyway.
Right.
Shebeseichel ha'musag koidem shenoldu b'mochus b'bnei atzma. In other words, it's a seichel of midah. It's not actual midah that is born into an actual midah. It's not a feeling yet. V'kasher eina meitzutam behesper v'asaga mikol mokam lo yuchal leimar behepoch kisich l'matika chayna b'chinat chesed gvur da'aba koidem shemeir me'en liyesh b'bina. More inyan shtik Rav. You see that, and you see that that's what he's talking about. Rav, that's the Inyan of the Topulim of the Mishnah and the Gemara.
Right.
And he's calling it here the midos of Chochmah and Bina. V'ashtika siag l'chochmah mishtuka b'train.
Mishtuka b'train means if words are worth one golden coin,
silence is worth what?
Silence is worth two.
Right. Okay.
Mishtuka b'train.
Mishtuka b'train means v'pnei sho'ela bitul koach ma de chochmah zeh l'mokra meisi kol ascholos shenikra chochmah simah. And this Indian of shtika doesn't mean just not to talk, really. It's the inner bittul of the mind, the koach ma.
Right.
Kanal u'moitzi misham askolo chadosha. Hulu. Ubchinas nehi da'aba, aynu bchinas mozna asechel v'achochma, ech she'yov v'adov v'chochma, v'dei ashpo b'fnei klayis yatzis. So, there's basically, in Chochmah, there's three levels. And these levels received from the three levels that we talked about before, where it comes in Arich. So the Pnimius level is the Pnimius Hitbonenut. That's Hadm B'Chochmah V'Chochmah Bina.
Right.
Then, that's the Indian of pure Hitbonenut. Then the second level is really also Hitbonenut, which is called Eon, but it's like the Eon of the Gemara, that the Hitbonenut is into the Midos. And the third level is not the Hitbonenut of which Midah it should be, but the Hitbonenut of how the Seichel should come to Hashpa'ah.
Right.
That means that you know what, it's not that you're trying to figure out the halacha, you know the halacha.
Right.
You read a book and the book said the halacha, you're trying to apply the halacha.
Right.
How to bring it out or how to teach it to somebody or something like that. The Indian of Nehi of the Seichel is the Taikif.
Right.
Like you say, in general, Nehi is the Indian of the Taikif. Like you say, the guy has guts, you know?
Right. The
that the shaykim, the legs are also called netzach and hayit. Kach pinat netzach v'hayit da'aba mekimin l'guf ha'moichet. Ulahepach she'eno tak b'daita b'kal yipul misvarasa michayv l'schus. He's a wishy-washy guy.
Right.
If he doesn't have a strong nahi, then he'll anybody, like one day you'll convince him one way and the next day you'll convince him another way. Mitamil l'toyer b'kach b'netzach v'hayit da'ima. Also, that's the strength of the bina. The derech klal, and in general, Hari rak m'pchinas nehida abba shemulboshim b'nehida ima misham ninsa mokra moichin lezoh, and the abba and ima is also really getting only from the he of arich. That's right. Derech klal. That's the usual thing. Shem m'pchinas hamidot shalomata min haseichel k'mo sheitbayer. In other words, the usual thing is not that he's really looking into what the midah should be, and certainly not that he's looking into what really the whole thing is all about.
Right.
People don't do that most of the time. People most of the time, in everything they do, they are only getting from the Hida Abba means from the thing that they already have, the Hanocha Sichlis.
Right.
You know it's Hanocha Sichlis, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how you say that how do you say that in English? How it lays in their head, the way they see things,
Right.
I don't know. There's got to be an English word for it, but I don't know what it is.
Well, translated exactly, it's an intellectual axiom. But
yeah, the intellectual axiom.
Right.
They have an axiom, the Hanocha Sichlis, that by them it's an axiom that this is the way reality is.
Right.
So like, by them it's already a thing that you got to save the whales.
Right.
They're not thinking about should you really save the whales or you shouldn't really save the whales. And
it's totally axiomatic by them.
And they're certainly not thinking about how did whales come into being in the first place.
Right.
But the only thing they're thinking about is what should we do now?
Right.
How do we raise some money and make brochures and stuff like that? They're not thinking about what the midah should be.
Right.
They already have a Hanocha Sichlis. And really, by most people, you say, so when did they think of when did they think of it in order to come up with a Hanocha Sichlis?
Most people didn't. It was given to them.
Right. Most people didn't. It was just a chashmal in the first place.
Right.
Like we're going to learn later about chashmal.
Right.
They got it, and in other words, most people are just sheep.
Right.
They never mind about the inner nature of reality. They never even thought about what the midos should be really.
Right.
Is this really the right thing that I'm doing? They never thought about it. So that the pneumiest level is like what Avraham Avinu did.
Right.
He didn't just think about if it should be Chesed or Gvura. He thought about, wait a minute, what's really going on here? That's what his analysis was about.
Right.
Now that's the pneumiest bina. Like you'll see that in chapter 1, he says that in the Oimek HaMusag is called the Shaar HaNun. That's not exactly what it means over there. The Shaar HaNun, Bina of Bina, is also called Shaar HaNun.
Right.
And Oimek HaMusag is also called Shaar HaNun. It depends which Bina of Bina and Oimek HaMusag you're talking about. Where the Oimek HaMusag is just to understand the explanation, that's not Shaar HaNun. That's just the Oimek HaMusag.
Right.
The thing of the Oimik HaMusag, and the Oimik HaMusag is the Bina Shebabina is the Keli to the Oimik HaMusag.
Right.
So the thing is where Bina Shebabina becomes Shaar HaNun is like where what Avram Avinu was doing. Where it goes past the depth of the Bina itself. Not only that, it goes even past the depth of the Chokhmah, all the way to the depths of Atik, and really it can go even higher.
Right.
It can go through Adlo, and like it said over there, that really it can go all the way up to Nagil of Nismach HaBoch Mamish.
Right.
That's the union of the Shaar HaNun. But in general, most people don't do that. Their whole Hitbonenut is just to analyze the external things. So, even though it has some of the power of Bina Shebabina, but really then it's not really the Pnimius of Bina Shebabina, the whole thing is just Nehi.
Right.
משם נמצא מוקר המויכן הזו, שהם מבחינת המידות שלמדתם מהשכל. In other words, the moichen of Zoh, which Zoh, the midos of Zoh is called the 7 days of the week. In other words, the day-to-day thinking of most people comes from Chitzonis HaMoichen, Moshit Bayer. ידוע פרט בעניין ייחודי עם דאבו, בין שכשהוא בבחינת הפנימיוס לצורך עצמן. It's not לצורך המידות at all. The Pnimius Yichud is the Tzorach Atzman. That's the thing of the Seichel itself. And the thing of the Seichel itself is really not even concerning the Seichel, it's really concerning the depth of the Seichel, Pnimius Atik.
Right.
That's the Tzorach Atzman. Shehu b'pchinas gimel reishin shebohen. Koydem shemitpashim midos adayin. It has nothing to do with midos. Even though on that level, all the midos come out automatically, and they come out perfectly correctly from that place. That's where the real midos of Dusha come from. Because that's the real avoida.
Right.
The pnimius Hitbonenut. ובין כשמתייחסים לצורך מויכן חדש לזון, שהוא בבחינת נהי לבד, in other words, it's just the midos of what to do now, or how to feel now, needs a seichel. This is coming from the external yichud of Chokhmah and Bina. וזהו ההפך משבת לכל חולו. פרי השמה, הכוונה בהווי אלוקינו, היינו בפנימיוס זה אבו. אבו יש חוכמה אלוקינו בינה. בפנימיוס זה אבו, שמשם הווי אחד, ייחוד איזון. שבא להם בבחינת תוספת מויכין חדושן, כדי שיוכלו לאוילת. That's when it comes in the surface of new moichin, means it's coming in from the mazolis in the past chapter, in order to be able to give a hilodah to new midos. Otherwise, it's not new midos, the same old midos. He's just figuring out what to do with them.
Right.
V'hainu b'mesiras nefesh the kriya shema, and that thing, like you see, that the real thing of Hitbonenut is the inyan of mesiras nefesh into the atmos.
Right.
That's what the Bina is. That's where the Bina Shebabina is really too. That's what it's Shaar HaNun. Masha Enken b'Torah mitzvahs lo mesiras nefesh, and that explains also. So how could you say that? The Talmud is just a chitzonius thing, where it's really a pnimius thing, and it's called Iyun, and Iyun is Hitbonenut. That's where you have the Torah mitzvahs without mesiras nefesh.
Right.
Where the study of the Talmud was mesiras nefesh, the atzmos, meaning that the whole thing is like it says in Tanya. I think it was just yesterday. That when Reuben wants such and such, and a tiny such and such, and Shimon tiny such and such, the Eibster says that the psak should be such and such.
Right.
And even if it never happened, it's never going to happen. That's mamish the Chochmah of the Eibishter, and when he studies it like this, to actually get the actual Chochmah of the Eibishter, and what his thing is really is Mesiras Nefesh, not really the inyan of the chitzonius of the thing, so what should we do in a certain case? Without the Mesiras Nefesh, en ha-yichud rak bechitzonius da'avo bezun. כמו שהוא במקום אחר, וכן בעניין 10 רגעי מלוכה, שהל אומן לעבור בבחינת הפנימיוס על ידי מסירות נפש דווקא. זהו עניין ייחוד אבו אלוהים וייחוד אבו תתוים, שהוא ישראל סבא תבונה, כמו שמבואר למעלה בעניין בינה תבונה. In other words, the Elohim is the actual etzem moichin for their own sake, which means for their own sake means really for higher than moichin. And avot hatoim, the main thing of Yisrael Sabbath Tvuna is to come up with a midos. Binyan bino Tvuna barichut. The B'chinat Yisrael Sabbath, although there's the Inyan of Shaar HaNun in Tvuna also. B'chinat Yisrael Sabbath vav kids from the Abba, Tvuna vav kids from the Ima, means it's the midos. Shenikra avot hatoim. The Yesh Od, however, there's really Yisrael Saba l'mayla gam yavo Elohim. There's really an Inyan of Yisrael Saba and Tvuna that go really even higher than even the Chochmah and Bina. And that's when Yisrael Saba and Tvuna go up into Yisrael Saba and Tvuna of Arich in the Chochmah Simah, which is the Vav kids from the Chochmah Simah Darach Anpin, but Tvuna Vav kids from the Bina Darach Anpin. Shemisham Nimshach Shoyer Shichud Avoy Elohim B'chinat Gimel Reish Sheboin Chulu. In other words, that's really where we said that the Yichud Pnimi of Avo is coming from the Mazolis, in other words, from Chochmah Simah and Bina Simah, like we learned in the last chapter.
Right.
It's really coming, obviously. It has to come because the Inyan of Chochmah and Bina is always into themselves.
Right.
Where the Inyan of Yisrael Saba and Tvuna is to spread outwards. The whole Inyan of Tvuna is the spreading out of the light of Bina.
Right.
So the spreading out of the light of Chochmah and Bina into of Arich into Chochmah and Bina of Atzilus is through the Avayim Tatoim.
Right.
והנה כאשר נמשך מעבור מייכל לזון בשביל תוילדס הנשומס, to have a new toilda, צריך להיות הייחוד בעבור בפנימיס המייכל, בשורש ובבייס מזולוס דרך אנטי. Then the yichud has to be the pnimius yichud, which the pnimius yichud is like he's telling you. The pnimius yichud is according to the base, it's where they're receiving. When there's a pnimius yichud of avod, that means they're receiving from the mazolis, like what we said in the last chapter. The 3 levels of the last chapter correspond to the 3 levels of this chapter. The giving birth of even the midos comes dafka from the mazel. It has to be up. It has to be the pnimius yichud avo. Otherwise, there's no birth. And that's, by the way, in the physical yichud also it's like that. It has to reach the pnimius hatainuk. If it doesn't reach the pnimius hatainuk, there will not be anything coming out of the brains to make a new person.
Right.
זהו עניין כל עליון. עליאס אור פנימיוס אבא כשמקבל ממזל ונויצר. אז גוימו חסודם טויבים. בבחינת יסוד שנקרא קוינה הכל. This is in the 18. כל עליון גוימו חסים טויבים קוינה הכל. וזוהי חסי אבוס. ומבי גאולת נבן להם למען שמי באבא. אז גוימו חסודם טויבים. When he goes up, then he can be going mochasarim toivim b'pchinat yisoy shnikra koina hakoil, La'oile toilet bezun. Then the zun can give toilet. V'zeo zoiche chasi avos mevigoyel evnev neim chulu. In other words, to remember the chasadim of the avos and to bring the Mashiach. There has to be a pnimius yichud. There has to be a Hitbonenut. That's what he's saying over here.
Right.
It's not so obvious, but that's what he's saying here. That the coming of Mashiach depends on a pnimius yichud of Avo. Means on his Hitbonenut dafka.
Right.
And it can't come otherwise. There won't be a coming of the goyel like people think that it'll come somehow from this or from that or somehow it'll come. Whatever the reason, he says, no, how could it come? You couldn't. If there's no pnimius yichud, there's no troves.
Right.
There can't be a Mashiach. Not only that, the whole real thing of the Mashiach is this thing.
Right.
The marshal b'zei yadua, and the marshal of this is known. More ishu chocham mufla b'yosef. Davka, a super smart guy. When he knows the emek asechel, not just that he heard an explanation, but he knows the emek asechel in its inner quarry, where it's coming from.
Right.
Then he can explain it to the lowest person. Then he can make new tzirufim in how to be maskal the seichel to somebody else. In other words, he can come up with a whole new different explanation that will make sense to this lower guy.
Right.
It can be a cholto l'chadish seichel acher. Not only that, but he can be b'chadish a whole new seichel. Lo ele mechadish mechamed zeh seichel. To bring into a birth of a new seichel from this seichel.
Right.
That's only when there's a pnimius hayichud of the moiche. Masha ein ken misha ein chocham muflag ve'ein otzefes rak hachokma v'aseichel dvorim kav yosin levad k'dei la'afkia la'asiga la'akma v'lad, in order that just basically that he understands it for himself. So he understood the explanation. Aval lo yuchal lo ilid chadoshes mimena klal, but he won't be able to bring new things out of it. The kol sheken shlo yuchal lo herid lahashel hesra seichel la'avina b'tina kulu v'nimtza shapchinas mehid l'chochma shehu pchinat yisoid ha'koyach ha'mashpia l'mekabel talui b'koyach ha'maskil m'kor chaytzav ha'seichel mein l'yesh dafka. He said, what do you mean? You just told me that Nehi is just the Chitzonius HaSeichel. He said, yeah, that's Chitzonius Nehi. That's just when it's bringing over a little bit of light into the Midos, not to be moiled new Midos. But in order to bring the actual Kippah from the Seichel over to have an actual Toilda, to actually be mashpia to somebody else, for that you need a chacham muflak and can reach all the way into the pnimius haseichel. Mainly is that from tachu beinyan toilets and neshomish mepchinas nehi, where is a toilet neshomish from nehi to zah. She'ena moilet ki im b'tesefes kach v'makor moichin shom milmala min haseichel. It has to go all the way to the source of the tainum. V'atam shebishvil toilet neshomish al de yuchud avo tzarich lios mimayla mimokar moichin davo shezeo mepchinas mazolos techok misima shehu l'mayla gam yichok mo bina darech an bin atzmai. Now really consumatic. V'hainu tam liyuchud nimius davo b'leil Shabbos Kodesh mipnei shu bishvil lo hilid neshomish lachen az dav kazman zivugu d'chachimin shen tamid d'chachamim Nikra and Kodesh. The Shabbos Shorsha b'Kodesh Elyon Prinat Nimis or Abba Kanal Vadal.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so if the guy would change the whales, is going to change around, that means he's got to reach up into midos of arich, and he's actually going to change them.
Right.
In other words, when the second level of chokhmah is there, he's actually looking into what the rutzin should be.
Right.
In terms of the midos, what the rutzin for the midos should be. So really, he's reaching up to the zroyas of arich, which are malubash inside of his chokhmah and bina.
Right.
Which, by the way, there's always a level like that. In everybody, there's a certain fanaticism. Like in Americans, they'll tell you that, well, America is the thing. It's by them hanocha sichlis because their rutzin is like that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And then the third level is just your normal day-to-day seichel. But basically, he's not looking into what's life all about, or what is it all about, or what's God, or anything like that. Certainly not looking into that. And he's not even looking into what should my morality be, or something like that.
Right.
Or to reevaluate the actual midos. The midos are already evaluated. He's just looking in terms of his day-to-day life. He's basically analyzing this thing to see, well, do I like it or not? How does it compare to the seichel that I already have? Huh?
Yeah, how does it compare to the nachasichlis?
The nachasichlis means to the seichel that I already have.
Right.
He's not trying to change the seichel and midos that he already has.
Right.
And to bring a total chadashes, and upstairs is the Indian of the birth of the neshamas from the Yichud Zun, you have to have the pnimius Yichud Avah, meaning coming from the mazolas. And not only that, what he told us is that the whole Indian of the coming of Mashiach has to do dafka with the Hitbonenut in the pnimius of the moichin. And that's it. Style amazing.
Very good.
So I looked up today circuit